Hi, and welcome to Dustin's Kaleidoscope. I am Dustin, and I am here today with Meg Marlowe, who is a genealogist, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how she started researching genealogy and give us hints on what we can do. So, first of all, thank you so much for being here, Meg.
Thank you for having me here.
So, as I mentioned, first of all, I should mention that we met each other at during a meeting at a presentation. Yes, a symposium for the South Orange Historical Society.
Right.
And you actually did some research along with your sisters on South Orange, and so that's how we met. But I have you here today because you have a very I like your history I like your family history, and you were able to help me, decipher some government documents for my family. So, but I'd like to find out, how did you start researching your personal family history?
I had this guy as my great-grandfather.
Okay.
George Washington Marlowe Jr.
Okay.
He was born in 1814, and this picture was always up in our house.
Okay, and that's the original picture.
That's the original. It's a tortoise shell.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is
Wow.
creepy, but it's what it is. I can't.
Sign of the times.
Sign of the times. And I used to stare at that. And the stories about him, so I had all these stories that were given to me as a little kid that he said, high forehead's a sign of intelligence, that we're Marlowes, that Christopher Marlowe wrote all the Shakespeare plays. He was an atheist, so...
And that probably wasn't something...
So he wasn't allowed to write in England, so he wrote all of them and sent them to some guy named Shakespeare.
Oh.
Who put them in for him.
Okay.
Yeah. So he had a lot of very interesting things, and I was always interested in that. And then when my father died in 94, we found a story that was written for Reader's Digest by a woman named Frances Rainey, who was my father's great aunt and his grandchild.
Oh, okay.
So she would go to George Washington Marlowe's house at Christmas. She had stories about him in there. It was very interesting, and it just made me want to know more.
And that's such an interesting piece of information to have, because most families don't come across a story that was written about one of their relatives, so that's such a great document to have.
And they had a large family, and it just had little tidbits about all the children that were really interesting. For instance, one of his children, Charles, was killed in 1893 in the Columbia River in Washington as a surveyor.
Oh.
The big flood came, and they got back to shore, but then he was pulled into the quicksand. And then they couldn't send the body home because it took 3 months. So then the Indians in Washington buried the body in a ceremony. So things like that. It was all apocryphal, really, because you have no proof of these things.
Right.
So then I wanted to go on the fact-finding mission, and that's really what started it. And then I got a computer in 1999.
Okay.
And I learned about Ancestry.com and Cindy's List, which is what I call the clearinghouse of genealogy. So...
And that just for people who don't know what Cindy's List is, it is a website that has different links to different sites that'll take you to different places to find out about genealogy, about different parts of genealogy. So if you're interested in the Civil War, they have information, they have links that'll help you understand how to perform genealogy.
Right, and it has different ways of looking at the links. Like when I went in just today, the first link was African American.
Exactly, yes.
Right, so it has things that you're, I always am impressed by you and your genealogy, because it's a lot of times, because of slavery, there was never any records, or the records were destroyed.
Right.
So the fact that you were able to find out so much has always been really exciting for me.
Yes, and that was, we'll talk about that later, but that was one of the reasons why we met up again, was because of some of the documents I have, and your amazing ability to decipher 1860 and 1870 penmanship, because I could not read it.
You just needed that second set of eyes. That's all it was. But yeah, Cindy's List, and that's where I would say if anybody was interested in really getting started and wanted to just get a feel for it, that's really where I would
And so how would you tell them, because, okay, so now we've discussed Ancestry and Cindy's List, but what do they do once they get to Cindy's List? Like, I mean, I have an idea of what I would do, and of course you do, because we
Right.
both have, we've both done this type of research before. But are people thinking, would you suggest, like, well, just think about where you came from, like if you're from Ireland or if your relatives are from Ireland, or do you think about where you are now, like if you have relatives in South Orange or Newark, or how would you suggest they go about finding out their family tree?
Well, I think there's a few different criteria that you will have personally yourself. So, are you trying to find out about a specific person? Like I was trying to find out about George Washington, and then I found out Washington Marlowe, and then I found out all these other people and followed their paths. Are you trying to find out about the military record of someone? Are you trying to find out about your family in Sweden with that surname, but you're not sure who it was? So there's different places you would go. For you, you knew that your relative was in the military, so you went and searched military records.
Right.
The reason I suggest Cindy's List is because if you do, genealogy, when you do it yourself, know from the get-go that it takes a lot of time out of your life. It has to be at least a hobby if you're going to do it right. And it can cost money, but it also can be free. And that's why I don't suggest right away to go to Ancestry.com, even though that's what Ancestry.com tells you to do. It's a great site. It is a great site. And I found a lot there. I've found relatives there. I really like using it. There's also Roots Web,
Oh, right.
FamilySearch.org, a lot of the LDS sites.
Right.
So
Those are free.
And those are free, and that's why I like Cindy's List, because you can poke around for a while. So if you don't have an idea what your criteria is, it's a good place to go to just poke around. When I first started out, I found sites for Ireland there. I found out about our surname, and that's how I found out about Marlowe, England, was through Cindy's List. So there was a lot that I learned that I could piece together.
Okay. Now, once people have found the information, and I know some of it is online, and some of it they may have to go to the library or something like that, but how would you suggest people organize it? Because that, I even find that to be overwhelming at times. Like, what has worked for you? And I know you started genealogy when a lot of this was not online.
Right.
So you have both paper and online stuff. How would you suggest someone
Yeah,
starting
better
today?
than me. Definitely. I write, that's what I do. I have a blog and everything. So what I do is I like to write out what I found for people. So in a way that's organizing it. And now it's out there. My family has it. I might put it on Facebook. If I find a really neat thing, like somebody sent me patents from my great-grandfather
Oh, wow.
from 1903 because he made a smokeless a consumer thing for railroads for the
Okay.
trains.
Okay.
He made a locomotive headlight. He was an inventor. He invented a lot of stuff, so he had a lot of patents. And they sent me the pictures, the illustrations. Very cool. I put them right up on Facebook. For me, I'm like, share the information, then we all have the information, and it'll get passed down. The neat thing about this day that we're living in, as opposed to the old days, where it was just oral history and you had it. It's important to
that's right.
catch it before people die, but we didn't. And couldn't catch it from him.
Right.
That once you put it out there, it's there.
So you suggest people put it online, like even if it's in a narrative form, like the patent that you were given for your grandfather, you just wrote about it?
Or
and
at
that?
least I would make like OneDrive, Google Docs,
Oh,
do
okay.
something where you're saving it for yourself, and I like cross-referencing too, like, so I may have some hard copies and then I have it online too. And you were even saying that I'm saving my hard copies just in case.
Right.
We don't know. But also, if you share it with your family, then your kids and your kids' kids are going to have it. So I always like, and what's the point of being the historian if you can't say, look what I found, you know?
Now, you know what? I have a question for you about that, because not everybody in a family is interested. There may be one or two people.
Very true.
So what have you, what has been your experience regarding that? But I know your sisters are
Well, I have a large family, so there are some people who are like,
Oh, okay.
But mostly, I think we are really interested because it's
that's
always
great.
been large. He had a large family, George Washington Marlowe Jr. Then his son, my grandfather, had a large family, and then we had a large family. So, you know, there's so many histories, and it's exciting to learn about it. I think we all kind of feel it, some more than others.
Okay.
And, you know, I haven't done you more than me, so we should really be saying Dustin Dumas, genealogist, and Meg, her friend, who helps her sometimes. Because you've actually gone places, and I don't know if you've said it on your show before about your mother, but like your mother was a genealogist.
She was amazing.
Because of your mother, are a genealogist.
Very true. Because well, you know what? Part of the reason I continue to do it is because I know how hard she worked. Like, she worked for all of my childhood trying to research our family tree, and I just felt like I feel a duty to continue it, but I also think it's fun. I mean, it's interesting because you never know what you're going to find, and I've found some very interesting
Oh,
things.
yeah, you did.
Yeah.
I mean, my goodness, you gave the presentation at the symposium about your family that lived in the Swedish community.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah, and they had to learn Swedish.
And
learn
like Swedish to go to school, right?
That's sort of like unheard of.
And even the Swedish community thought it was amazing, right?
Yeah. And so all of these different stories you can find in genealogy. And I think that's something that a lot of people may not even realize, that it's not just about like the current, like not about your immediate family, but
Right.
I mean, obviously it isn't, but there are so many other stories that you can find out other than the ones that you were saying, like word of mouth, or like, you know,
Right.
you heard of.
Yeah,
so.
those apocryphal ones.
Exactly.
So I did that point when George died. In his obituary, it said that his grandfather was Thomas Fitzsimmons, who signed the Declaration of Independence. Now, obviously, this is a huge story, and a lot of the cousins that I've met through genealogy have said, yeah, and what about this story about our relative, our great, 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 whatever, being Thomas Fitzsimmons? And I'm like, I can't find any proof of that. I can't claim him. Like George Washington Marlowe Jr. claimed him, and they put it in his obituary, which they wouldn't do now. They wouldn't just say,
have proof.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, really? Okay.
Well, you know, we're just out of time for this segment, but we're going to be right back. This is Dustin's Kaleidoscope, and we'll be back in a moment.
After 17 years working as a mason, Mike was laid off. I met him when he came into the library looking for help. He found a job opening, but the application was only online. Mike said he'd spent his entire life around tools, but had never used a computer. I showed him how, and he ended up applying for numerous jobs online. I saw Mike the other day. His new computer skills paid off. He's working again.
New Jersey libraries are transforming lives. Tell us your story.
Hi, and welcome back to Dustin's Kaleidoscope. I am Dustin, and I am here today with Meg Marlowe. This is, I want you to finish up, we ended the last segment, and I wanted you to finish up about...
Thomas Fitzsimmons.
Yes.
Right. And the Thomas Fitzsimmons, who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, my great-grandfather claimed him on his obituary as his great-grandfather. And I cannot find any proof of that. So the point is, a lot of people will tell you things apocryphal.
Right.
You believe. That's not really genealogy.
Yeah.
It's lovely. And my sister Tina has a saying, never ruin a good story with the truth. Yeah. But if you are in a fact, so it's kind of fun though to take those facts, and I mean those facts that you are handed down, and do that detective work. So if you were ever a little kid and you wanted to either be a spy or a detective, you know, Encyclopedia Brown kind of thing.
Yes.
That is part of the fun of genealogy, is trying to find the proof. And I haven't given up on Thomas Fitzsimmons completely.
You just haven't found.
I won't claim him until I find that, because then he
factual
comes,
information.
with lots of cool stuff. But I don't really think he's ours.
Well, so along those lines of trying to find the factual basis of a story that's been handed down, I brought a couple of books that are resources. I know this is one that you're familiar with, and it's The Source, and this is something that a lot of people use. It's basically a Bible.
I was going to say
Yeah.
that. It's a genealogical Bible.
Yeah, it has
Yeah.
everything in here from like questions you may want to
Right.
ask relatives to how do you go about finding out about certain things with respect to like geography and stuff like that.
Right.
And there are a couple of other ones too that I have here. And these are just I just brought these because I knew that you would be talking about about genealogy and some of the resources online, but I thought,
Right.
books are also good too, just in case
They are
people
good.
happen to go to the reference desk at the library.
Yeah, I like this one because this is the world we live in.
Yes. Finding information
And
on the
a lot of
internet.
people don't have the time or, the wherewithal to pick up and go. Like, I've always wanted to go to Chicago to the library because I'm sure there's a lot that I can find there. When you're researching your family, sometimes you want to research the area too.
Yes.
Like, I found out so much about Marlowe, England, and found out that the Marlowes were from there. And it was really neat to go. I went back to, dinosaur time in here. It's crazy.
That's good.
Yeah.
But this is something you can't find online, which is
Right.
you said genealogy can become expensive, and that's one aspect. If you decide, hey, I want to go to the actual town across
Right.
the country where my great-great-grandparents lived and find out, what it was like, sometimes you can't even get the records online because they have not been digitized.
Well, I would love to do that, but I can't afford it yet. I want to go to Ireland, but you can if you find out. Look up your surname, really.
Right.
Find out what your surname means, and then you can. This is all a detective work.
It absolutely
really
is.
is.
And now that we're talking about some of the
love
resources,
this story.
as you know, because you helped me decipher some of the information, I have a couple of relatives who actually served in the Civil War, and so I actually had to write to the National Archives in D.C., and for the other one, I had to write to the National Archives in St. Louis because he lived a little bit longer. So depending on how long the vet lived, they're housed in different places. But one of the most interesting things that, as an African American, I don't have the luxury of being able to go back, for
Right.
like 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 generations without a lot of hard work.
Right.
And that's due to having family that was enslaved.
Yes.
However, one of the coolest things when I got this, so basically what this is from the National Archives, and it's his military profile. So basically this says, hey, he was in the Army, or I guess just the military in general. He served in the war. It would give all the information about it. But what's so interesting is that there's an actual deposition, which Meg was kind enough to help me with, because the writing is back from the 1860s, the 1870s, and it's actually in his voice. So I get an idea of what he was talking about, how he spoke, that kind of thing. There are also other depositions from other people as well, and these depositions in this particular document are to confirm that he had. They are to confirm that he was actually in the military, so he could receive his pension.
Right.
So that was one of the coolest things when we were like going line by line trying to decipher it, and as a consequence, you could get a flavor for how he and other servicemen were received. You got an idea of what he felt, like, and other things like that.
It was just amazing. It wasn't just how they were treated, it was their amazing bravery to be. And look,
Yes.
it doesn't matter that they may not have been able to leave. The fact that they just kept going, that he didn't just lay down and die. I mean, your three-time great, marched for days with no food, was injured, and kept marching and doing what they told him to do, and fighting.
That's all in there. And I
it's
would
all
never
in
have
there.
known that.
And he says it in his own words.
Right.
So it's amazing to read. It was spine tingling to read it. It really, and I felt like he was really guiding us, because it has, they use the F's for the S's, and
Exactly.
it's very hard to read. So.
Yes.
But I felt he was guiding us. I really did.
It really, it really helped to explain a lot of things, because
Yeah.
this is a part there are no living relatives who would know about this, and the same
Right.
with you regarding, the pictures that you have and the stories that that have been told to you.
Right.
You have, like you said, you like the stories, but you also want to back them up with facts.
Right.
With mine, I didn't even have a story to tell. So
Yeah.
this is great in being able to tell a complete story about, my relative, my, their great grandfather living in Memphis, and stuff like that. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on, because I know that you also share that love for genealogy, because it's not just ticking off a box and saying, I found, my seventh great, grandfather
Right.
or grandmother. It's also the stories behind that,
Yes.
that help us understand how they lived, where they lived, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had a couple of other pictures that I thought were interesting. I want you to
Okay.
tell us a little bit about those pictures
Okay.
as well.
So this picture you can't see right now, but this is my great grandmother,
Okay.
my father's grandmother.
Oh, okay.
Now, my father was born in 1914. It's true. I'm not lying. He would be 104 this coming January. This is Daddy in 1921, and that's his mother. She was 52, and his father was 56, and that's all his sisters and one of his sisters' babies. She was born in 1897, so there was a big span with the children.
Right.
She was so tired.
How many children did she have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, if you count the 2 boys. So there's another story. They kept having, back in the day, they kept having boys till one lived. There was a high infant
right.
mortality rate.
Right.
They were always named the same name. So, like, if you had a daughter and the daughter died, you named the second one a different name.
Right.
But the boy was named after the dad till the boy that lived.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, isn't that so weird?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So Daddy lived. Yeah. It's so cool. Look, she died in an anesthesiologist, in the dentist chair from anesthesia.
Really?
Yeah.
So these are the kind of stories that I think are interesting, because
Yeah.
no one is, in 100 years from now, I think it would be interesting for someone to know that. Someone else might be interested.
Right.
And just sort of going back to the question I asked earlier about people being interested in the family, I know that there are always people, like you said, who are interested in hearing the end result. Oh, this person lived here and they
Right.
did this, but they're not always interested in actually doing the research.
Yes.
So it's good to have that written down, so that in 100 years from now, I had this great aunt or
Right.
grandmother who she died in a dentist chair. So, and I think these are the things that make genealogy interesting
I agree.
overall.
And I think every family either already has a historian or should. I think each family needs their historian. You need to have a family historian, or it's not going to carry on.
And so, I'm glad you said that. What would you say to compel people who don't have a family historian? Like,
Well, if you're a small family, it might be harder for you. I mean, certainly I wouldn't say do it if you don't like it, because it's a passion, and as we said before, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money. I fall out sometimes. I've been doing it since the 90s, and sometimes I not only can't afford it, but I just can't. There's just no time. So I'll drop out for a while, and then I come back. But it's been years. I mean, the nice thing is history's waiting for you. It doesn't go away.
This is true.
No.
And what I've found is that the resources get better and better.
That's
so something
true.
that wasn't online 5 years ago,
Oh,
now
yeah,
it's
what a
here. I can get it from my
difference,
computer
right?
instead of going to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I had somebody send me the manifest from my great-grandmother's ship from Dublin.
Wow.
And it was from a group in the Midwest that collected manifests. They were like a seafaring.
You're really?
That was in the 90s. Nobody does that stuff anymore.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
You must have, I know you have stuff that, like family information that is online and also that is physical. You would like fill up a room with all of the information that you have.
Probably mostly the digitized, because I did get really far into that. But just touching on the family historian thing, I'm certainly not saying you have to have one, but I do think that, especially in any extended family, it's important to have somebody to go to, because people are going to want to know. Kids are going to ask you. And it's a lovely, lovely gift to yourself to have that history, to know what happened in your family.
And I think from my personal perspective, it makes learning about history much more interesting, because you have your family in that particular time period to reference what was going on.
Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
my grandfather lived in Chicago. Like this family lived in Chicago when it burned. That's a neat thing to think about. All the things, when the Columbian Exposition was there, that's when those two met.
Oh,
And Dr. H.H. Holmes was Devil in the White City. The serial killer was there at the same time as my family.
So they
It's
give
so
you a reference,
interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I have certainly enjoyed talking to you.
Thank
and I'm
you
sure
so
so many people are going to get an idea of what genealogy is and how to do the research and start it. So I'm so glad you were on the show today, Meg.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
You are welcome. I am Dustin, and this is Dustin's Kaleidoscope, and we will see you next time. Bye.